all of us have decades, plural, decades of layering one egoic identity or thought form or pattern on top of another. And it's these identities that one by one we need to examine and peel away and ultimately disintegrate. I liken it to having an open-aired home that we're, no roof above us, that we're just full on open to the unbounded consciousness that we are. And that as soon as we're born, somebody starts to shingle a roof. And they put one shingle on and another, and each of those shingles, each of those tiles is an individual identity or a thought form, which becomes beliefs, which becomes patterns. And they're really in our way of seeing the sky above us, the unboundedness that we really are. And so we want to be able to poke at each of those shingles gently and with such compassion that it has been built up over time. It takes gentleness and poking to dissolve them. We are well shingled in egoic identity and thought forms and beliefs and patterns, that we come by it not naturally, we're not born that way, but we come by it honestly. We've been given identities, we take them on, and what that does is it really prevents us from seeing ourselves as anything but completely separate from everything and everybody else in this world, in this universe. And it can be a very frightening place if we are all alone in the way that the ego thinks it is. The ego identity is so ubiquitous and so tenacious that it's very hard for us to recognize the identities because they feel it's an identity. It means it feels like that's who we are. And so it's hard to see that there really is something beyond that. We're just calling it ego because it actually is a tool. And when we misidentify as it, that's when we get into problems. One of the things I like about the term false self is that ego is not a self. Mm-hmm. It is a construct in our mind. It is just a thought. And when we identify it as a self, that's when we run into problems. Okay? And the problem is when we misidentify ego, then our identities, our thought forms, our beliefs, which is just a thought we keep thinking, whether they're true or not, even if we can cognitively say, this belief is false. I'm a failure. No, I'm not. That is completely false. I still have a hard time giving it up. I will still suffer that false belief. That's how powerful an egoic identity is. But when we forget that we are this I am that is unbounded, and we think we are an individual, vulnerable self called ego, then we do all kinds of outrageous things to one another to protect self. So self could be just me. Self could be my nationality. One nationality against another. It could be my football team against another football team. I mean, these are identities. Culture itself is an identity, is an egoic identity. It actually doesn't care about all of the bits of players and people within it. It has its own identity that it's trying to defend. So we need to understand that when we are defensive with an egoic identity, we will protect ourselves at the cost of others. And so to expand into this fuller oneness in a really visceral, true, full way, everything's one, we're all one, there's only one, to really know that beyond the mind, we have to get rid of all of these shingles that we've been pounding so diligently to our rooftop, and pull them off one by one so that we can really see and experience a greater one. And when we experience a greater one, we won't do to another to protect. We won't do harm to another. It maybe unintentionally, but we won't do something to another to save ourselves, because it's all one. There's all one. We won't cut off our finger. We understand that in our own body, and an expansion of that is to understand that as a whole, world, as a whole, all of us.